My name is Marilyn Elie. I'm a member of the Indian Point Safe Energy Coalition, and I'm here with some wonderful people from our local community and from New York City. You'll be hearing from them, and you'll be hearing their concerns about why we are also concerned about the proposal on Tier 3 to subsidize nuclear power in upstate New York, why we're very concerned about gas being part of our what should be a fossil-free energy future. And let's start off with Judy, because she has a petition with lots and lots of names on it. And, well, Judy, tell us about it.
Oh, Judy Allen from Putnam Valley, 14 miles from Indian Point. When I started this petition, the only thing wrong with Indian Point was the spent fuel pools, the leaking, and the junction of the two earthquake faults about a mile from the plant. They had not yet started building the Algonquin pipeline. But since 12,966 people have signed it, now there's the Algonquin pipeline, which is an even worse threat. So go to credo.com and sign the petition and tell the PSC that we don't need nuclear, we don't need gas, oil, or coal.
That's right. Or oil.
Thank you.
Thank you. They all need to stay in the ground. Gas, coal, and uranium. Next, we'll hear from Catherine Skopik. She came all the way from New York City because she's concerned about the statewide standards for nuclear power. Catherine?
Thank you, Marilyn. And thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Catherine Skopik, as Marilyn said. I'm a resident of New York City, but I'm here because we all are in this together. Whether we're 3 miles away or 50 miles away, we're all in danger from Indian Point. We are here in Cortland for the Clean Energy Standard hearing, and I just want to say 2 or 3 things about that. One, in the Q&A after the information session, I noticed that when they were talking about the cost of this program, that they were talking about 49 years out, and it will be less expensive because of the low cost of natural gas. I said, wait a minute. If you are serious about installing renewable energy, we would not have natural gas up there 49 years from now. We don't want natural gas tomorrow. Is there some kind of deal that has been made so that although we've banned fracking, all of us here have worked on banning fracking, we still have pipelines, compressor stations, and LNG ports. So anyway, I have a little concern about the dedication to actually creating renewable energy. My 2 asks for the CES are 1, subtract nuclear power plants upstate from this plan. Nuclear is dirty. And 2, add offshore wind. And I just want to read 1 or 2 quotes here. One is from Dave Kimmel from his May 11, 2006 article. Fossil fuel, especially oil in the form of gasoline and diesel, are essential to every stage of the nuclear cycle. And CO2 is given off wherever they are used. The only way the nuclear industry can operate is with massive amounts of fossil fuel. And I can go on and on. I won't have time to read this whole list, but maintaining the tailings pond uses diesel power, and the uranium hexafluoride gas that is needed in this process is energy intensive. The uranium dioxide power is pressed into pellets and baked in an oil-fired furnace to form a ceramic material that is then loaded into a zirconium alloy tube. Several of these tubes form one fuel assembly. Assemblies are then transported to the reactor. A 1,000 megawatt nuclear reactor contains about 100 to 130 tons of uranium dioxide, and usually 1/3 of that is replaced in rotation each year. There's just a few of many examples. Don't go to the industry website to learn about nuclear. Okay. Dig deeper, and you will find all the problems that nuclear energy and uranium have. So get it out of this clean energy standard. We want real energy that is clean. We don't want our money subsidizing these dirty plants. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. That's a lot of information, and we'll have to think about all those facts. We have someone who was a former first responder. I think you're retired now, aren't you, Pat? Okay, but you're still very concerned. Yes. All right, here you go. Say your name.
My name is Pat Evans. I'm from Tarrytown. And yes, I was an EMT with an ambulance with the ambulance corps in Tarrytown, and trying to get across the bridge for an emergency was impossible with the lights and sirens. How would you like to be backed up on the bridge trying to escape a nuclear catastrophic disaster with radioactivity flowing down the river at you? That being said, when I was young, a long time ago, we were all concerned about fossil fuels and the fact that when those fossil fuels give out, we won't have any more energy. Well, along came nuclear energy, and as far as the general public was concerned, it was a miracle. Of course, we weren't told that, for one thing, fossil fuels are needed to produce the nuclear energy, and number two, there are all these spent rods that we will have to deal with for hundreds of thousands of years to come. Not clean, not clean at all. So the fact that we are in danger by the presence of a nuclear disaster right in our backyard, along with it being put as a clean energy source in the standards, no. It is not clean. It is anything but. It is not a miracle. It is a nightmare. We must make sure that the standard for clean energy only contains clean energy sources, solar, wind, especially. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And we know that we can't phase out everything at once, but like has been said in our political debates, one at a time with good policy. Nancy, you want to go next, and then we'll have Gary. Okay.
I live actually 3 miles from Indian Point and have been worried about it for a while. But that was before the AIM pipeline came through within 105 feet of safety structures at Indian Point. Now I'm not just worried, now I'm terrified. Any type of rupture of a pipeline that close to Indian Point could spell disaster. The radiation would go out around 50 miles, depending on which way the wind was blowing. And New York City is 25 miles from Indian Point. We are all frontline communities, so it doesn't matter if it's 3 miles or 50 miles. This terrible, decaying, falling apart nuclear plant needs to be shut down. But even if it's shut down, there will be all those spent fuel rods. The spent fuel rod pools are far more crowded than they were designed to be. They are not protected the way the core is protected. An explosion of the gas pipeline could potentially wipe out the control room, damage the pools, and we would have a meltdown that would be worse than Fukushima, because there is more radioactive fissionable material at Indian Point than there was at the Fukushima power plant. We don't need to produce one more spent fuel rod. It needs to be shut down now, and the AIM pipeline needs to be halted now. The NRC did a terrible evaluation to say that putting a 42-inch high-pressure frac gas pipeline next to critical safety structures would not increase the danger at Indian Point. And if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. There's one in Tarrytown, there's one in Brooklyn, we've got another one up at Bear Mountain, and please, see me afterwards. I'll be happy to let you know. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Nancy. Ellen, you want to come on up? I know you have to, you're on a very tight schedule here. Okay, introduce yourself, please.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Weininger. I'm Director of Educational Outreach at Grassroots Environmental Education. I just want to say a few brief words. Others have already mentioned that nuclear power and fossil fuels are not our energy future. And we already know that public health experts, medical disaster experts have weighed in on this subject heavily. Recently, the American Medical Association and the Medical Society of the State of New York have acknowledged the health effects of gas and fossil fuel infrastructure and have called for health impact assessments and are deeply concerned that this kind of build-out forewarns a major public health crisis and climate acceleration of our climate crisis. And likewise, nuclear power is not green. It's not any kind of fuel that we can accept. It's already been stated. It is not a zero-emission fuel, and ratepayers should not be burdened with this. Nuclear power companies should not be subsidized to keep their plants open. We already know that the spent fuel rods pose a serious danger, and we have no practical disposal plan for this radioactive material. You've already heard about the dangerous pipeline that has been sited and now under construction in immediate proximity to the Indian Point nuclear power facility, and that it endangers more than 20 million people who live and work in the tri-state area. And nuclear power and pipeline experts are deeply concerned. We already know from the work of Dr. Mark Jacobson at Stanford University that there is a roadmap to a 100% renewable energy for all purposes, for all energy purposes, that is achievable by 2030. Not even 2050, not 50% by 2030, but 100% by 2030. And we have the ability, we have the capacity, we have the economic feasibility that has been demonstrated by that study to achieve this. And the only impediment is political will. And we cannot continue on this reckless course of nuclear power and fossil fuels. And we need to adopt this roadmap for 100% renewable energy by 2030. And last but not least, my ask is that the Clean Energy Standard needs to include a very serious tier on conservation. California has a Flex Alert program, which is a significant demand response program. That should be our baseline attempt to conserve energy, and conservation has to take a notch up, and we need to gear up in a very significant way to put that front and center, along with energy efficiency and renewable energy. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you. Really good information. Gary Shaw from Croton is next. Gary? Gary, our famous writer and speaker who really needs no introduction, but there you go.
Hi, I'm Gary Shaw from Croton-on-Hudson. I live 5.5 miles from the Indian Point nuclear plant, and I'm here today to once again let the Public Service Commission know that, first off, the whole idea of defining nuclear as emissions-free and carbon-free is factually incorrect. One of the things that I showed the PSC at their May 31st meeting in Manhattan was an image published by the NRC showing routine radioactive releases from U.S. nuclear plants and all the ways that that effluent gets back into the environment and back into our bodies. And so calling nuclear emissions-free and carbon-free is just factually incorrect. And the whole idea that putting nuclear into the clean energy standard would create subsidies from failing nuclear plants in upstate New York is absurd. To me, it's schizophrenic that the governor of New York is trying to close the Indian Point nuclear plant while trying to subsidize nuclear plants in upstate New York that cannot compete in a deregulated market. I also think it is absurd that we have what people are referring to as natural gas, but we should call it by its real name, methane. It's methane that's much worse than carbon dioxide in terms of global climate change. And while we banned fracking in New York State ourselves, we are bringing in a huge amount of fracked methane from Pennsylvania running across pipelines through our state. And the idea of building a 42-inch pipeline right next to Indian Point within 105 feet, my understanding is that it will run about 105 feet from the jet fuel storage at Indian Point, which is used for backup generation. Just imagine a gas pipeline next to jet fuel with a control room in Houston. It's just absurd. And I do want to say that there should be another tier in the clean energy standards for offshore wind. And I just want to read a small quote from a column that was written by Kit Kennedy of the NRDC. And I quote, "Offshore wind power generated in the ocean waters off New York is now significantly closer to becoming a reality thanks to two important announcements yesterday. In the first, the U.S. Department of Interior Secretary Sally Jewell announced that the federal government is moving forward with the offshore wind power leasing process for an 81,000-acre wind energy area 11 miles off Long Island, with an auction to be held by the end of the year. The New York State stepped forward with its own bold news that the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, that's NYSERDA, the state's clean energy agency, will participate in that auction with the goal of securing the offshore wind power site. I also want to note that, going back to nuclear, that there was an article from EcoWatch that the EPA is proposing raising the allowable exposure to radiation in drinking water to an amount equivalent to 250 X-rays per year. And the reason they're doing that is because nuclear plants emit radiation as a normal part of their operations, and radioactive nuclides don't go away, so the exposure limits just keep going up and up. Let's have a real clean energy standard and use wind and solar and conservation and energy efficiency.
Thank you, Gary. The best power plant is one you never have to build. Donna, we have somebody from Woodstock, traveled all the way from here. Donna, you want to talk for just a minute about why you're here?
My name is Rachel Marco Havens.
Oh, well, sorry.
I thought you were talking to Donna. And
I apologize.
I represent a youth-led intergenerational climate and social justice movement, actually, that is popping up all over the globe. We have a chapter in Woodstock, New York, where I just drove down from. We also have 2 chapters popping up down here in Peekskill and also in Croton on the Hudson, because young people are stepping up and saying, you know what, we don't want to be handed a settlement when our elected and non-elected officials begin to talk about clean energy standards. I don't need to reiterate anything any of these people here said, except for that our young people that I work with are starting to really, really want to know why they're being fed line after line after line after line of platitudes. Let's just say platitudes. And I just want to say that yesterday I was calling for a vote on this particular clean energy standard bill, and I stopped and I looked and I said, wow, how come none of these people who are my mentors, these incredible, powerful women, just coincidentally, why aren't they signed on to this? And I wrote to a friend and I said, why aren't you signed on to this? Oh, this is why. And when I got the press release today, I got in my car and I drove to Cortland Manor. We're all neighbors. I'm 70 miles away. It's okay. I'll be here to support you all of us. New York.
And thank you so much for the effort. It's really appreciated. I'm sorry I missed your name, but take a message back to those that you're working with that we support you, and we really welcome your support. Susan Van Dolsen of SAPE could not be here today. She's ill. Margo Schepart of the Indian Point Safe Energy Coalition has a statement from her that she's going to share.
Okay. I am speaking on behalf of Susan Van Dolsen of Stop the Algonquin Pipeline Expansion. SAPE will not accept the trade-off that is now being promoted by the media and industry that pits responsible American citizens who oppose nuclear power against those who oppose fracked gas. This is a strategy to divide us, and we will not fall into that trap. Neither nuclear power nor fossil fuels are clean nor safe. There are no bridge fuels and no sacrifice zones. It is time for our policymakers to take responsibility for the damage that has been done to our planet and to the people, and to put every possible resource into truly clean energy, into wind and water and sun, and to move away from nuclear power and fossil fuels post-haste. Governor Cuomo has squandered the past 6 years and has not ramped up conservation, efficiencies, and renewable energy with the urgency that was needed. He has allowed the state to issue permits for the AIM project, the mini-sink compressor station, and the CPV gas-fired power plant, major greenhouse gas sources that are climate killers and have already caused harm to the health of residents living nearby. And now the governor, who wants to close Indian Point, wants to prop up the economically distressed nuclear industry by making utilities buy a certain amount of power generations from nuclear plants. This is an unacceptable trade-off. Fracked gas is cheap right now, and there's a glut of fracked gas that the industry wants to sell. There are many gas-fired power plants proposed throughout the Northeast which will use this product and enrich the fossil fuel industry. The industry justifies the build-out of pipelines and gas infrastructure because of the closure of nuke plants. But we stand here with our allies to let Governor Cuomo and the Public Service Commission, the public and the governors in New England, that replacing nuclear power with gas is not acceptable, and that it's a false dichotomy that is used to divide and distract us from the goal of ending our dependence on dirty and dangerous fuels.
Well, I think we're going to have to stop right there. It's time to start the hearing. Thank you for joining us, and tell your friends. Nuclear is neither clean nor green, and we want clean energy going forward. We want green energy, and we're all united in wanting offshore wind. Tier 4. Thank you very much.
I saw a great big tourist bus of folks from out of town. For 40 days and 40 nights, they covered miles of ground. They had a map and compass, but they still were not arriving. Oh, they couldn't get to Pleasantville, so they kept on driving. And then one day the sirens blew, the county was aghast. It seems the aging nuke plant had an accident at last.